Let me start off this video by saying the following. There was a time where I didn't like horror games. Horror games were one of the many genres within the gaming sphere that I did tend to avoid, like the plague, from playing. I don't like jump scares or the atmosphere most horror games in the genre have. It's primarily due to me just not really liking the suspense-filled and anxiety-inducing ways that just rub me in the wrong way for a lot of these games. I have no hate for horror games at all in the slightest though. That is far from the truth. I just think that horror games are more fun to watch from a distance rather than playing them. I say this as there's one thing in particular that changed my mind on playing horror games. This isn't a review site or me secretly implying some YouTuber made me like horror games or horror in general. No, this is something that was released a few years ago that was an enjoyable experience that I love to bits. It's hosted on a little site that you may know actually. The site in question is Roblox.
Life. There's Roblox.
Roblox is one of those sites that I really do like. Despite the many bad decisions made on the site by its owning company and the suits that stand behind them, it's a really great website with a lot of games under its belt. One of the newest Roblox games that has come onto the site in recent years actually really interested me the most when it was released. A game that you probably heard about all over the internet and inside of the horror sphere. That game is Doors. One of the most influential pieces of horror game media on the Roblox platform. A game that has been raved and praised by many a YouTuber before me as one of the scariest games on the entire site. Doors is an amazing piece of Roblox media that was an opening door, no pun intended, that I feel the game leaves very unfinished in many regards. While sure, the game is terrifying and made content creators like Kaisenat, Speed, and 8-Bit Ryan jump out of their seats and overall improve the reach that Doors had is honestly an impressive thing to achieve. The big but here to mention is that while Doors has a lot going for it as a game, there's a lot that it just doesn't get right or perfect at all. There's no real story or context for why you're inside the hotel, no notes or lore pieces left by anybody on why this place is so interesting, and the environments are boring to say the least. The monsters as well, especially the ones added in recent updates, feel more like hurdles rather than something genuinely terrifying that adds more pressure to the experience. Okay, who the hell is messing with my script?
Give me a drink. Give me a drink.
Or when
Give me a
notes
drink. Give me a drink.
Developed by the group Openshade Hadal Division, led by developer and modeler Zeal, Pressure is a game that has spawned countless memes, minigames, and videos from its hinges to the point where it's honestly insane to think about. This game is popular, and I am very late to talking about it, I know. However, this is one game that I think should definitely be talked about more, as it's honestly one of the most fun horror games ever to be made from the Doors genre. But before we get into the reasons why though, I believe it's fair to start off with the game's front page, and more specifically, the inspirations behind the game. Doors, Iron SCP Containment Breach, and oh god, I can't escape this game. Ultra Kill? Okay, let's be honest here before anything. These inspirations are something Pressure wears with a lot of authority and runs with it well. All these inspirations are taken with their own aspects. Iron Lung and SCP can be seen through the monsters, whilst Ultra Kill can be seen through some of the musical tracks, which we'll come back to later. The Doors inspiration is quite obvious. The game follows the pre-established gameplay loops seen by it and used by many of its competitors, Pressure being no exception of course. And it's an open door for developers to just milk it without a proper spin or anything interesting to make the experience more enjoyable. I feel that Pressure does not fall under this entirely anyways, as there are some striking comparisons to Doors that can't be ignored, yes, but Pressure also does things Doors does, but has its own interesting takes in many different ways. So where does that put me and this video? Well, I want to go over Pressure as a game and try to convince you as the viewer on why this game is honestly a masterpiece and one of the best Doors-like games out on Roblox right now. I want to talk about gameplay, presentation, monsters, music, and even the graveyard as well within this video. Also, it should be obvious, but there is going to be a massive spoiler warning right here before we continue. This game's like nearly 8 months old by the time I'm making this script, but I feel people should still experience the game first before seeing me give my opinions and probably berate me in the comments for the 2,000 different reasons and whatnot. Without further ado though, let's begin. I touched upon this earlier with Doors, however, it is present in a lot of games in this genre where there is no real story to them. A lot of them just put you inside of a lobby waiting to go into the main game, and that's really about it. One of the big X factors of Pressure is the fact that it has a story with fleshed out characters and world building that genuinely feels believable for a Roblox setting, all presented in a beautiful high-definition package that genuinely looks and feels like a Valve game in its presentation and the characters you interact with across the main expedition. Even when loading into the game for the first time, it yields a story for you to follow where you, the player, are an inmate of a high-security prison where your crimes are considered irrelevant. 3 men from a corporation known as Urban Shade arrive at the prison looking for applicants to help them search for a crystal of unknown origin or power that is inside one of their facilities known as the Hadal Black Site that has recently gone into lockdown. While death is likely, anybody who can retrieve the crystal and get back safely will be pardoned and released with a mysterious sum of cash, presumed to be a high amount in the millions, to which our character has made the choice for us. Freedom at the risk of death. A death that means nothing to Urban Shade as, well, you are expendable and not expected to return. This opening is much better than just spawning into a lobby and going into an elevator that looks like it's from the 1960s, or Outlast 1 during the wheelchair sequence. Even before getting into the game properly, you have your mission laid out before you in Pressure. It's honestly great to see a game like Pressure do the storytelling aspect when Doors didn't, like mentioned. The context given makes the game feel so much more alive in the story aspect and sets you up for the proper game in a meaningful way. Now you must be asking yourself, how does that translate into gameplay itself? And to answer your question, it's done relatively well. The Black Site is filled to the brim with life, and more importantly lore that you can find through each run you partake in. Many of the rooms around the Black Site feature documents on more passive entities and monsters that you don't need to die to in order to gain their document for. Hell, even dying to the monsters in general yields more than tips or tricks on how to counter them. Once again, like how it's done in Doors, but honestly it's done better here. I know it sounds like I'm punching down on Doors here, but it's true. I do genuinely feel like this game takes Doors' death formula and just improves on it in many ways. When you die to one of the monsters in Pressure, you're not just learning how to counter the monsters you face within the Black Site through ominous tips or tricks. You're learning about them too at the same time, and how they came to be within the Black Site itself. Hell, even reviving itself gives you an entire document on the recently added Lady Death, who, as of the 4.5 update, resurrects the player through paying Ferryman tokens, a currency that is not locked behind Robux that you can buy within the lobby for Kroner, a currency you get whenever your current run ends. Funny thing is too, as sourced from an interview that Bedsheet ghosted with 3 of the devs for Pressure itself, a lot of the rooms and features within the game were made because, quote,
I thought it'd just be cool. Oh, that'd be cool.
It's really cool.
Which, honestly, I find completely based. Many of the game's rooms as well give one of my favorite things in video games: environmental storytelling. Something that Half-Life taught us years ago, but AAA developers nowadays just neglect because all they care about is money and $30 transactions for what was originally an epilogue or some sort of story in an updated version of a game. I love you, the answer, but why did Atlas do this to you? Certain rooms, such as the room before the ridge or other normal rooms, include screens with status boards with information on the Black Site itself, office-esque rooms where people would have once worked, and even cafeterias where employees of Urban Shade and the Black Site would have once been inside of. This isn't even including the long list of unique rooms that you can find throughout your runs, like the Navi room, the Vacuole Void Mass, and rooms where submarines have crashed through the walls of the Black Site. They're all rather intriguing from a storytelling standpoint and adds more lore to what has happened since the site was locked down, and even prior to it too. These are only a few examples though. There are many more that I have neglected to mention here that are going to be, or have been, a part of the background footage for this very video, as I would probably be here for the next 10 minutes talking about them. Sorry guys. Outside of the game's presentation story, what's the characters of Pressure like? Well, outside of our main freaky guys that try to kill you, who we'll come back to in a bit, there's a few entities that don't actually do any harm to the player directly, in most cases, and are more supporting roles that try to help you or impede your progress throughout the black site. The characters present within the main game outside of cutscenes show similar personalities and goals through their— okay, fine! I'll talk about him first. So about halfway through the game, around door 50 onwards, there's always a set encounter with a rather special character to both the game itself and the community as an X factor of the game. Ladies and gentlemen, Sebastian Solas! Yeah, that's right, baby. It's finally time to talk about one of the best characters in the entire game. Voiced by Gianni Matrigano, this is the only reason why you're playing this game. Sebastian is the certified poster boy of this game. Alongside being the supporting shop character, he's the one who sees you when you die and gives you the funky one-liners that sometimes bully you as the player, and it's honestly hilarious to hear some of the lines and not feel ashamed of myself on dying to these goofy fellas at times.
Seems like you're gonna be sleeping with the fishes.
Oh my god,
I'm very impressed.
Sebastian is honestly a gem of a character, and it's honestly reasonable to see why considering everything regarding him. The voice actor chosen for his role fits, and Gianni does an amazing job portraying him. Sebastian as a character has an amazing backstory that you can buy for 1,000 intel that you find around the black site, and it honestly makes you sympathize for him as a character, and overall makes you as an outsider playing this game feel sorry for what he and the other entities have had to go through. It also makes you feel like your mission is just negating the freedom of him and the other monsters and entities that were trapped by Urban Shade. It honestly flips your perspective on what we're doing as the player in helping Urban Shade for our own freedom is morally correct. Now that we're done with the story and whatnot for Pressure, let's get into the gameplay. I'm gonna be completely honest in regards to the gameplay of Pressure. If you've played Doors or any game like it, you've played Pressure. It's just that simple. The concept of Pressure is the exact same: go through doors, encounter the freaky guys, have a figure encounter twice, and win. The freaky guys are still present no matter what, and to be honest, I really like these ones. The Angler variants, also referred to as node monsters, have a nice variety within them rather than just being the simplistic rush or ambush from doors. Sure, they do have pressurized versions of themselves in the form of the main Angler and also the Frogger variant, which is literally just Iron Lung's primary monster but with drip. However, there's also other variants as well, such as the Blitz variant, which is the fastest of the Anglers, the Chainsmoker variant, which increases the player's level of how do I spell this again? Clayphobia. Clayphobia, okay. Which increases the player's level of Clayphobia if they're inside a locker for too long. It's due to the fumes the variant gives off. That's just 4 of the 5 gnome monsters, as I don't really want to mention one due to a personal grudge against it, and I don't want to have to spend 5 minutes ranting about them. Maybe another time, Pinky. There is also technically another quote-unquote node monster, but we'll get back to them shortly. Outside of node monsters, how do the other monsters hold in their own gameplay sense? Well, alongside the node monsters, there are also entities like the Eye Festation, which works like the Eyes entity from Doors but requires more gameplay than just don't look at the monster, since it actually tries to make you look at it rather than just being static or teleporting around your cone of vision. Plus, if you use the flash beacon on it, you enrage it and make it harder to deal with, which is needed for one of the game's achievements, by the way. Well, actually more than one, but you know. The Squiddles entity is another one that reacts when you're close to it or when you use a light source near it, which if you do, they'll attack you. You also have a deadly wall entity that will try to sneak up behind you to consume you, let's say, which you just counter by listening for their footsteps and, well, just looking at them. Also, you can consume a piece of this entity if they died from a gnome monster, which is pretty cool.
Yummers. Yummers. Yummers.
Oh Jesus Christ! Okay, I'll mention this guy. This is Pandemonium. The meme, the myth, the minigames. Arguably one of the first things people talk about besides Sebastian when talking about this game is definitely this monster in particular. Pandemonium is not necessarily a gnome monster as mentioned before, but does act like one. See a light flicker? Then it's possible that he's arriving. However, instead of just hiding in a locker like usual, this monster plays mini games with you in the form of this bastard shaking your screen and cursor around 50 million times while you try to keep it in the center of your screen. The encounter with this monster in particular is honestly just such a cool addition and adds quite a bit of action to a more rare version of a node monster. Speaking of which, to sort of continue the conversation from Pandemonium, I would like to quickly take a detour to talk about a subject that Bedsheet Ghost mentioned in his first video on Pressure, the balance of action and horror in, well, a horror game. Balancing these two elements are vital to making a horror game enjoyable in a lot of cases. While yes, the jump scares and suspense are honestly quite alright in horror games, elements like sneaking around a monster or fighting back without a gun in my opinion is also a big factor in what makes horror games terrifying but also have that action that they need to succeed. Bedsheet Ghost himself actually mentions about the Resident Evil series during his own video, and well, I want to mention one example of my own, an indie horror game known as Spooky's Jump Scare Mansion. Now yes, I know that Spooky's gameplay is not the most entertaining, however, let me explain. In my opinion, Spooky's does the whole horror and action balance pretty well. While yes, the main majority of the action in this game is running through rooms to escape the funky guys known as the specimens, in the main game primarily, there's still a lot of horror elements within each locale, for the game specimens being a prime example. And also I guess as well, once you get the axe, that also adds a bit more action as well, but I digress. In Pressure's case, during the main game, and outside of Mr. Microgame over there, there's also a set of two primary encounters that add a lot of action to the experience. Around the halfway point after you meet Sebastian, the scrunkly guy, oh my god, you'll be presented with the task of repairing generators to take you down a different route through the black site, as the main path is blocked off. Indoors, around the halfway point, is where the figure encounter would be, yet here, there is the searchlight encounter, the first of two, just like with figure. Within this encounter, you need to fix generators within a large open space, whilst avoiding the looming threat above, presented by the searchlights. A threat precursored by the aforementioned rooms where you need to repair generators, and even a small glimpse at the entity itself. Honestly, this encounter is pretty alright. I never really find any issues to this encounter, same with the second encounter, and honestly is kind of the reason why I've not really died to these guys yet. Speaking of the second encounter, it occurs at the Ridge, the final area of the game where the crystal that you've been tasked to find is being held. Well, I say the Ridge, but it's kind of right after it. During the second encounter, you're tasked with fixing wires to a repulsion cannon, then turning it on so that you can exit the site safely. Alongside you in this encounter is a giant robot known as the Trench Bleeder, who is named Lucy. She's basically watching over you for this encounter and doesn't leave you in the dark basically. And well, obviously, the searchlights are here, and oh my goodness, this encounter is just honestly awesome. I'll talk a bit more about this encounter during the music segment, but for now, going back to the gameplay stuff, I believe it's time to talk a little bit about one of Pressure's side modes. In my opinion, the mostly forgotten brother, the Graveyard. The Graveyard is a secondary story-based expedition for Pressure released as a part of the infamous Haunt event hosted by Roblox within October of last year. I won't cover the controversy here outside of a quick TLDR in the form of Roblox, am I right guys? But in all seriousness, This little mini expansion to the main game honestly speaks for itself. You're on a mission to explore a graveyard where skeletons roam to put a stop to a party that's happening there. And, well, it acts more as a running sim than anything, where you have to primarily avoid the monsters through maze-like rooms in order to make it to the top of the church at the end to shut down the party. It's definitely a departure from the normal gameplay loop, but one that I still like nevertheless. It mixes up things with going from skeleton bouncers that want to rip your head off to a giant centipede to weeping angels. God, right, these guys are just terrifying. Honestly, I don't really have too much to say on this expansion. It's pretty alright. It honestly has the right length for what it needed to be as a short side story. Now that we've talked about gameplay, the story and whatnot, what else is there left to really talk about in regards to Pressure? Well, I think the last thing I want to talk about is the music. The music is definitely one of the most godly parts of this game, and honestly, it's done so well. I listen to a lot of video game OSTs from AAA games such as Sonic and Mario to indie titles like Undertale and Ultra Kill on a daily basis. I love music within video games due to how diverse a lot of them are, and Pressure is no real different. A lot of horror games tend to go with long drones and unsettling ambience or darker and depressing tones for their music, if any music at all in some cases. Pressure does things a bit differently. While sure, there are somber and depressing tracks that fit the mood of the situation that you're in, such as Closed Casket Funeral and The Park on the Old Mountain, songs that really fit the situation we find ourselves in. I mean, hell, take a listen real quick. There are then songs that are more action-filled or are entirely different genres and take inspiration from other music entirely. Remember the fact that this game takes inspiration from Ultra Kill? That is very much present with the music in this game in my opinion, as many of the tracks feel like Ultra Kill songs in of themselves. The aforementioned songs of The Park on the Old Mountain and Closed Casket Funeral give similar low tones and sadder vibes from Ultra Kill's soundtrack, like Disgrace Humiliation and the music box variant of The Fire Is Gone. And that's what I really like about this game's music, as it takes its inspiration from outside the norm of the horror genre and runs with them very well. Hell, this is even mentioning some of the more action-packed songs such as Knock Knock, Eyes in the Skies, and Search Party, which all represent their specific parts of the game rather well. Knock Knock being one variant of Pandemonium's theme, which gets your adrenaline pumping for that specific moment. Eyes in the Sky focuses on the first Searchlight encounter and represents the feeling of facing this looming threat for the first time in such a daunting way that makes the player feel small. Then, what about Search Party? I want to dedicate this entire section to Search Party because oh my god, I love this song. This song honestly represents the triumph that you are slowly starting to feel across the second major encounter with the searchlights. And it does such an amazing job at smacking you across the face with that feeling more and more as it continues. You know War Without Reason from Ultra Kill? It's that. It's that song. It just feels so good. And even the final parts just make you feel so much more determined to come out on top and overcome everything that the black site had thrown at you at this point. Like I said during the gameplay section, it's essentially a victory lap with everything trying to kill you, with the searchlights being the final thing that is doing so. And I just want to quickly mention as well the final part of this song, when the searchlight is trying to make its final attempt to kill you, which is ultimately stopped by Lucy stomping on the searchlight. This moment right here is honestly one of my favorite parts from this game, and is such a fitting end to our experience with the black site. Speaking of which, I think that's pretty much everything I had planned for this video in regards to Pressure. And honestly, I think it's time that I give my closing thoughts on the game. So what do I think of Pressure as a game? Honestly, Pressure is a great game and a love letter to the doors genre on Roblox. One that doesn't really feel dated and does, sure, have its fair share of issues here and there, but is honestly such a treat. Whilst there are definitely a lot more secrets within the black site that I even haven't discovered, there's just so much that I've talked about here that honestly solidifies my personal thoughts on this game. It's fun, its presentation just is amazing, and it's only expanding with every update. And honestly, I'm excited to see where it goes next. And moreover, I'm excited to see where the story goes with it being expanded more and more, with new entities to find within the black site and maybe even beyond through more events and collaborations even. I really do hope that this game continues to thrive, as it's one of those experiences that I feel more people, especially those outside of Roblox, should experience for themselves. Even if you're not a horror fanatic or are one but don't like Roblox, I implore you to check out Pressure and experience the world and its characters, and overall just everything. Even if it's through videos like this, I still desire you to check out this game, as it truly is one of the best examples of horror. Not only the doors genre, as I've said before in this video, but rather the entirety of Roblox itself. Alright, I'm gonna go play fighting now. Bye!